Aloha, good morning.
Aloha, how are you, Kelly?
Good, how are you doing, Ed? Good to
I'm
see
okay. So far, so good. I'm in cold Washington still.
you. One of my other virtual screen backgrounds is a mountainous snow-covered mountain, which was Haleakala 2 years ago. It snowed all the way down to the 6,000 foot
I
level.
remember that, yeah. Okay, Wisdom, tell me when we're ready.
We are ready whenever you are.
Okay, cool. First of all, good afternoon from Washington, D.C., and aloha to each and all of you. I am Congressman Ed Case, one half of your presentation this afternoon. Congressman Kai Kahele is actually en route back from DC to Hawaii. We originally thought that we had votes next week, Monday, and so we're going to basically stay over the weekend and do this from Washington, D.C. But yesterday, the U.S. House decided that next week was a district work period, and so Kai decided to go home. So he is actually taxiing at LAX, I think it is right now. He's listening. He's going to chime in, and then as soon as he can get to a full-on video camera, he will join us personally. So I'm going to kick this off, and he'll chime in by audio. I want to send a special aloha to each and all of you, especially all of my fellow elected officials throughout Hawaii state and county government. It's so good to look at the RSVP list and see so many folks that I've worked with throughout the years and throughout the last couple of Congresses. And then I really appreciate the folks that have joined that I haven't met yet, and those that were just sworn in very, very recently. So we welcome you to public service. This is an initiative by your congressional delegation on the House side, by Congressman Kahele and I, and of course the title is How to Work with Your Congressional Delegation. Some of you are experts in working with your congressional delegation, and for some of you this will be the first time. And so we're going to start from scratch on this and take it from the lowest common denominator on up. A couple of logistics to handle. Congressman Kahele and I will give you a presentation for some time, and hopefully that will be valuable. You can type your questions into the chat box, and we will try to answer them along the way or at the end. And if we cannot answer them, and if you give us your address, which I guess we'll have, we can get back to you after our presentation. Okay, so with that, go ahead, Wisdom. Okay, that's a nice picture of Washington, D.C. This was before January 6th. But today in Washington, D.C., the sky is crystal blue. It is about 40 degrees. I just took our National Guard troops through the Capitol, and we were just standing on the plaza outside. These were our local troops that helped us through the inauguration. And
Yes. You know, earlier I could see.
Okay, can you hear me?
Just listen like that. I don't know.
Yeah, so there's 100.
Okay.
Oh.
Most of them never been before, so we showed them through the Capitol, and then we stood outside on the plaza right there and took pictures. So that was a proud moment for me. Okay, go ahead. Let's start with kind of a basic question that I think we all understand instinctively, but dig down a little bit on it, and that is the importance of our federal government, your federal government, to us in Hawaii. Of course, our federal government impacts us in a couple of different ways. The number one way is the federal laws and regulations under which we all have to operate. And these have both positive and negative effects on us in Hawaii. And our job in your congressional delegation is to try to enhance the positive and amend or change the negative, or to avoid the negative. I'm going to give you just one example here that everybody I think is pretty familiar with. The Compact of Free Association are agreements that our country has with our three neighbors in the Pacific, the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of Palau. And I think we all know that under those compacts, citizens of those three countries can live and work in our country without going through the regular, immigration and visa process. And we have rich and vibrant community of COFA migrants throughout Hawaii on all of our islands. However, the federal government along the way did not cover these migrants for the costs of basic services to which any green card holder, for example, is entitled, and certainly any citizen. And so they were not being covered, for example, by Medicaid. They were not being covered for, child nutrition, for SNAP programs. A study conducted by the Government Accountability Office, the investigative arm of Congress, calculated that the cost of the COFA migrants under this non-coverage situation to the states and territories was astronomical as to our budget. In Hawaii alone, we were spending and are spending about $200 million a year out of our state government, because we make up that difference without being compensated for by the federal government. And that was a huge burden by the federal government. We partially solved that at the end of last year by passing a law. Senator Hirono led this to cover COFA migrants in our state with Medicaid, and that Medicaid window of application and eligibility is now open. So that's certainly something you want to communicate through. We have unfinished business because that's only half of the problem. So we're going to go back and try to clean that up with the rest of the non-eligibility packages as we go forward. I just give that to you as one very, very tangible example of where our federal government, despite good intentions, I think, forgot about what the consequence was to the state and the counties. That was a major consequence to us in Hawaii. So those issues are critical for us as your delegation to try to address. The second area, of course, that the federal government is deeply involved in our Hawaii is federal spending, federal efforts that occur in Hawaii, federal employment, federal activities, all of which are areas that generate great dollars to our local economy. And then, of course, there's direct federal spending to Hawaii in the form of federal support for major programs. Education and healthcare would be the largest programs along those lines, but it stretches out throughout many, many other areas. I'll show you a slide later on that tries to break that down, as well as efforts through grant applications from our state and county governments, which are not regular funding in that sense. They don't go on from year to year under federal law, but they are major grants that come in on application by the state and county governments throughout Hawaii. And one of the basic messages that both Congressman Kahele and I want to convey to each and all of you is that in many ways our state and county knowledge and expertise in seeking and applying for federal funding is inconsistent across our state. Some parts of the state are very good at it. Some parts of the state don't do it very, very much. But all parts of the state can benefit from working with your congressional delegation to look for those opportunities and to ask for our help for federal funding. I have put here just some very, very basic figures about how important this is. And by the way, this is pre-COVID-19. So in FY 2019, fiscal 2019, almost $23 billion of total federal spending. That includes pretty much everything. So wages and salaries of federal workers, of which are of course, monies that do find their way into our economy more indirectly, perhaps, retirement payments, direct payments, and contracts. You can see there are federal grants allocated to Hawaii in the same fiscal year, somewhere in the range of $3 billion. Major share to Medicaid, transportation, where many of our transportation infrastructure projects are financed substantially by the federal government, housing, education, and on down the line. If you talk about just straight operating budget, the state of Hawaii, that is, that figure is somewhere around $15 billion a year, which is almost 20% of the total state operating budget comes directly from the federal government. So obviously in a COVID-19 crisis, that becomes especially critical. And that was all before COVID-19. During COVID-19, since last March, the US Congress passed and the president signed the CARES Act, which was a 2-point-something trillion emergency assistance package that was over and above normal federal spending. And that CARES Act package obviously was critical to our entire country in areas such as small business, direct payments to our citizens, supplementation of state unemployment programs, and a variety of other areas. We were tracking in the congressional offices some 75 plus separate federal programs of benefit to Hawaii that CARES Act money was being funneled into. That money went to both the state, to the counties, both directly and indirectly, as well as out to the private nonprofit sector and other communities that really needed it, such as small businesses. We have accounted for somewhere in the range of 10.7 now $1 billion in the last calendar year, and still growing in this calendar year from the CARES Act funding coming to the state because of that one emergency assistance package. So that's been critical, and our efforts have been directed very, very much at not only passing that emergency assistance legislation, but then tracking it all the way through from Congress to the administration here, to the recipients, state and county government, out to the actual recipients of, for example, small businesses. So this figure is a calculation by, as I recall, our state department, calculating that for every dollar Hawaii pays in federal taxes, we get somewhere close to $2 back. That is actually one of the highest ratios in the country, which is partly about a lot of federal spending in Hawaii, because we do have more federal spending than many other parts of the country. That's primarily federal defense spending, which is our #2 industry, as you all know, and for all intents and purposes has been our #1 economic driver for the last 10 plus months, and that will continue for some time into the future. But also other federal spending where we have just done a better job maybe than in other states of facilitating that kind of spending. So that's the importance of federal government to Hawaii. Okay, go ahead. This is just a quick agenda. I introduced we're going to introduce our offices. We're going to overview the 117th Congress. We're going to talk a little bit about our congressional committee assignments because much of our ability to influence the national agenda for Hawaii comes out of our committees, and we have an excellent distribution of committees across the congressional delegation. We'll do a little primer on federal grants, how to look for them, how to find them. We'll give you a COVID-19 update with the more recent legislation. We'll talk to you about kind of the third bucket of our efforts, which is assisting you and your individual constituents with your needs. And then we'll go to Q&A. Okay, go ahead. Kai, are you on yet?
Yes, I'm on. Can you hear me, Congressman?
Yeah, I can.
All right, great. I don't know if they can see me, but I did put my video on. Oh, okay, terrific. Well, hey, I just wanted to thank everyone and send a big aloha. Actually here in Los Angeles International Airport, headed back to Honolulu, and excited to be coming back to Hawaii for the next week. This was unplanned. We were supposed to be working in DC next week, like Congressman Case said earlier, but the congressional calendar changed. Next week is a committee work week, so I decided to head back home and bring my family back home, who's been here in DC now with me since after Christmas. So it's been a long month. It's been unlike anything I could have ever imagined, but it's good to be coming home. And so I want to thank each and every one of you who took the time to jump on this call with us today. You know, it's our goal to introduce you to the appropriations process that Congressman Case is an integral part of in the House of Representatives and for Hawaii, and also talk about some ways that we can work together with you moving forward and how you can reach out to us. So, introduction to my congressional office. I did something different that no other member who's held the second congressional seat has done, or for that matter, a member of Congress. And I decided to cite my flagship office in my hometown of Hilo. And so our congressional district office for Hilo, the office for the second congressional is in Hilo. And it's at 99 Alpuni Street, right down in downtown Hilo, where the county, building is, the state building, the federal building. And our DC office is located in Longworth. For those of you familiar with the house buildings of Cannon, Rayburn, and Longworth, I'm in Longworth. And so looking forward to when we can travel to DC, welcoming you to my office and the nation's capital. Anchoring both the DC and the Hawaii operations are three very key people in my staff. They're my most senior team members, and I encourage you to get a chance to know them if you don't. Our chief of staff for Washington, DC is Christy Wagner. I'll go to the next slide in a second, but just so you can capture her information there. She is my DC chief of staff. She's got at least 10 years on the Hill, significant amount of experience on the House Armed Services Committee, was a former legislative director and the former interim chief of staff for Congressman Seth Moulton from Massachusetts. She's a Waiakea High graduate, a local girl. She happens also to be the daughter of former football coach Bob Wagner. So I encourage you to get a chance to know Christy Wagner. She's outstanding, and she leads our DC office. Jumping over to Hawaii and our flagship office in Hilo, we have Stevie Lee, who is our district director. Stevie's a Punahou graduate, a USC graduate, and a Richardson Law School graduate. Spent about the last 10, 15 years working for the federal government here in California as a special agent, has moved back to Hilo with his wife and his young children. It now calls Hilo home. And he is our state district director and the office flagship director in Hilo. Stevie, just like Christy, manages a staff of anywhere between 8 to 10 people, including our college interns, our caseworkers, our legislative director, our legislative shop, our communications team. We have a very robust team. And so Stevie's critical for that role on Hawaii Island, and I suggest you get a chance to reach out to him as well. Stevie also, by the way, is has a lot of ties to Oahu and Kailua, and so he's very familiar with the windward side. Because we decided not to have our flagship office on Oahu, it was very important for me to have a major presence on Oahu. And so anchoring our Oahu operations, as well as our field representatives on the neighbor islands, is Ikaika Mahoi. Ikaika is a University of Hawaii graduate, played football there, was with Senator Schatz for the first few years when Senator was appointed to the United States Senate. Went to Kamehameha schools and then came to my office as a state senator, I think about 2015 timeframe. He spent about 3 years with me, and he's now come and followed me to Congress and is anchoring our Oahu operations. Just as important as Ikaika is, and she is not on this slide, but I also would like to make note, is Roz Makalua, who is also full-time on Oahu. She's our Hawaii communications director. And between Ikaika and Roz, they split a lot of the neighborhood boards and the community engagement associations that we have on Oahu. And so as we build up that capacity, for those of you on Oahu, Ikaika and Roz are pivotal for your engagement with my office. Now, Ikaika has a unique role because he also manages our 4 neighbor island field representatives, who are just as important as the rest of the staff. This is something I've done differently than my predecessor, is I've placed a field representative on the islands of Maui, Lanai, Molokai, and Kauai. And we will share those information with you so you know on your respective island who the point person is you need to go to work with our office. On Kauai is Mike Contrades. On Molokai, it's Gene Ross Davis. On Lanai, it's Joel Aki. And on the island of Maui, it's Stephanie Ohigashi. And so they can be your point person to the congressional office to when dealing with a range of issues, even down to requesting a certificate to honor someone in your community, or to deal with a casework issue, or when we have a natural disaster or some type of contingency issue we need to work with. they will be the point people on your island. Okay, I think, and of course, there's our website there. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, there's Christy, there's Ikaika, and there's Stevie. And there's their email and their information. Please reach out to them. Like I said, Ikaika is on Oahu, and he is our belly button to the state legislature, to the other federal offices, to our other CODELs here in Hawaii, to the different federal agencies that he's working with, as well as about half of the neighborhood boards and half of the community stakeholder organizations on Oahu, with Roz picking up the other half, because there's so much on Oahu. It would be very difficult for Ikaika to do that by himself. But depending on what your issue is, whether you're at the county council or in state government, or you're in part of the federal government through a federal agency, please connect with Ikaika, and he wears a lot of hats and has a lot of great experience. Okay, next slide. Next slide, if we get a chance. Okay, and since Keopu is on this slide as well, I would, I invested heavily in communications, and I have both. If you can go back to the previous slide, since her name is on there, I will make mention of Keopu. Keopu Relitz is our DC communications director. And so between Keopu and Roz, they are a powerhouse communications team. I mean, it was crash course by January 6th, because we did not expect the attack on our nation's capital to happen, and everything from a flurry of media requests and press releases as things unfolded very, very rapidly. So Keopu and Roz are now seasoned veterans at the end of week 3. And they're looking forward to serving you from the perspective of communications and attending public events and giving remarks and speeches to the various organizations that would like me to attend their events. So Keopu and Roz, please take down their information as well. And happy to answer questions on my office at the end of the presentation. But at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Congressman Case, and he can talk about his office.
Okay, mahalo. So my office is a little more streamlined than Congressman Kahele. I did have the privilege of representing the 2nd Congressional District from 02 to 07, and I had my offices structured much as he did. So I think this is exactly the right way to do that with presence on all of the islands, because the 2nd Congressional District does represent all of the islands, including a fair bit of Oahu, which a lot of people don't think about. They think that Oahu is 1st Congressional and the rest of the islands are 2nd. That's not the case. There's a good chunk of Oahu that is in the 2nd Congressional. All of the windward side, up over the North Shore to the west side is into Wahiawa. That's as far as it goes. The rest of it is 1st Congressional, Makapu'u, all the way through urban Honolulu to Mililani, down through Waipahu, Ewa, Kapolei, Ko'olina. About 750,000 people each, or a little less, and that's of course as things are divided up. So I have a much more compact district, so I don't have to have quite as many offices or staff, for that matter, to pull it off as Congressman Kahele has to. So here's the information on my office, and the most important thing here is my website, case.house.gov. Everything that I talk about here in terms of contact information can be found on my website. How to get in touch with us, what we do, sign up for our e-newsletter, a whole host of stuff can be identified there. Edcase.com, ed.case@mail.house.gov is our general email address. That'll bring you into our office immediately. I have 2 offices, like all members of Congress. I have an office here on Capitol Hill. I'm sitting in my office right now. I have about anywhere between 8 and 9 staff that are here with me in Washington, and then I have a district office in Honolulu. I do have a physical district office. I haven't been using it much over the last 10 months. especially to host constituents and others, but we do have that office and we do work out of it. I have two principal senior staff. I have my chief of staff, Tim Nelson, that's right here with me in Washington, D.C. Tim has been on the Hill for a couple of decades now. He actually started out with Patsy Mink way back as a young person right out of college. Worked for me my first time in Congress, worked for another member, and then came back as my chief of staff. Very, very knowledgeable of Congress as well as Hawaii. Jackie Conant is my deputy chief of staff. She is in Honolulu. Similarly, Jackie has been in government for a long, long time. She also started out with Congresswoman Mink and worked for me throughout my prior term in Congress. Worked for the Army Corps of Engineers mostly after that, and then came back to head my Honolulu district office. These are the people that you can go to directly for pretty much everything. The direct for you, my colleagues in state and county government, the direct access to my office that's best is really Jackie Conant. She's right there in Hawaii. She is charged with keeping in touch with my state and county government colleagues, and so you should feel free to just go straight to her rather than have to go through the general the general email. You can do that; it'll still get to us, but Jackie is the fastest way in. Either call her or email her. In Washington, and I have about 6 people in my Honolulu office. We usually have interns as well as fellows in and out of our offices. Right now, we have 2 interns, one in DC and one in Honolulu, as well as one Department of Defense fellow. So somebody from the military who's spending a year with me to help out and to learn about Congress. I do almost all of my legislative work here in DC. So if you think about this as kind of 3 buckets, the way I think about how I run my office, I've got my responsibilities to help lead our country, so to make decisions on national issues. And then the second bucket is Hawaii. How do we help Hawaii? So how does the federal government help Hawaii, which is mostly what this seminar is about. And then my third bucket is how do I help you with your individual needs, many individual needs by folks, whether it be, what happened to my Social Security benefits, or why can't I get an appointment to the Veterans Administration, or my aunt has been waiting for 10 years now to be able to come to our country from whatever other country, and can you find out why it's taking so long? These are individual constituent concerns. We sometimes refer to that as casework. I do almost all of my casework in Honolulu. I do my legislative national leadership work mostly in DC, and I do my helping Hawaii work in both offices. These offices are fully synchronized, so there's no stovepipes going on. We're all one integrated office. It's just where people are physically located and what they're more directed to do in terms of their job assignment. Okay, go ahead. Let me give you a quick overview of the 117th Congress. And the first thing to note is that under our system, we function in 2-year Congresses. And so this is the 117th time in our country's history that we have commenced a 2-year Congress. The first Congress was when George Washington commenced his presidency. And so this dates back a very, very long time. We're starting another cycle here. Everything that was formally done last Congress, which ended on January 3rd of this year, is technically POW. And we have to start over again. So bills, resolutions, appropriations, the whole ball of wax. However, as a practical matter, of course, we're carrying things from Congress to Congress. I'm working very hard on issues that I worked hard on the last Congress. And so, although it's a formal demarcation, the work of Congress goes on from Congress to Congress. And as you're in the delegation here, as any of our fellow elected officials know, you pick up where you left off. So again, this Congress started on January 3rd when Congressman Kahele and I were both sworn in for another 2-year term. In his case, his first 2-year term. And it ends in 2 years on January 2nd, 2023. So we've got 2 years to get our job done. A couple of things, of course, have happened since the last Congress of some consequence. First of all, we are working with the new president, and Kai and I were both present proudly at the steps of the U.S. Capitol to bear witness to the peaceful transition of power when President Biden became our president. And so we are now dealing, of course, with a new administration, a new Democratic administration versus a Republican administration, and that will make a difference in terms of policies. It will make a difference in terms of opportunities where perhaps we couldn't pursue them realistically under a Trump presidency because they were just anti whatever we were trying to accomplish. Those will be possible in a Biden presidency. And so one of the things that we are focused on is, well, what couldn't we do the last time around that we now can do? We also have a new majority in the Senate. And that has a couple of consequences to our country and to our Hawaii. The first consequence is obviously that that also makes a difference in terms of agenda and policy. And so things that Democrats on the House side wanted that the Republicans on the Senate side didn't get done. Now we have Democrats on both the House and the Senate side, and a president who's a Democrat. That doesn't happen very often, that you have a so-called trifecta. You could think that that's good or bad depending on your political perspective. However, the point here is that there are very, very narrow majorities in the House and no majority in the Senate. The reason the Senate is in Democratic hands is because our vice president, who breaks the tie in the Senate, is a Democrat. So it's 50-50 over there. And so the bottom line is that Democrats are not going to be able to ram things down everybody's throat at all. This is still going to be, in many ways, shapes, and forms, a Congress where you have to work with people across the spectrum to get anything done. The major issues, and the second consequence of this, for Hawaii's purposes, is that our two U.S. senators, who sit on very, very good committees, will become majority members of those committees, in some cases chairs of those committees, and chairs of subcommittees, and that's going to make a very, very big difference. Senator Schatz is on the Appropriations Committee. He will move up in seniority in some of those subcommittees, and he will be on the majority agenda side of things. He will likely take the chairship of the Committee on Indian Affairs, which has jurisdiction over Native Hawaiians, which is critical to us in Hawaii. And then Senator Hirono is on the Armed Services Committee, also on Energy and Natural Resources, fantastic committees for both our country and for our Hawaii. She will move into major areas as well. So this is a new game for us, not completely new, but it does open up opportunities that we can pursue to help Hawaii. Of course, the issues that we're facing are, I don't think, going to be any surprise. We have COVID-19, which is going to continue to be the #1 issue for our country for the entirety of this Congress in one way, shape, or form, whether it's the public health side and getting the vaccinations out and throughout our country and our state, to economic dislocation, such as in Hawaii, worst in the country, to additional emergency assistance for that purpose, and then the disruption in our social and community fabric. And we're going to be very, very focused on all aspects of COVID-19 throughout. And that's both a national issue and, of course, a Hawaii issue, given the impact of COVID-19 on our Hawaii. We're going to have a big infrastructure bill. Every once in a while, Congress and the president line up that the nation needs a major new investment in infrastructure. So roads and harbors and airports, but not just roads, harbors, and airports, which are kind of the traditional infrastructure areas. Also think, schools and water lines and pipelines. We probably will see that in the quite near future, and I'm going to defer to Congressman Kahele because he's on the committee that's going to deal with this critical area. Appropriations, I'll get into appropriations later on. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for federal spending on a yearly basis. In Congress, we pass our appropriations bills every single year. It's not like the state of Hawaii where there's a 2-year one and then a supplemental. We have to go do this every year, which is, I think, good because, we keep a pretty close track of spending. And if we need to supplement it or change it, we can do it on an annual basis. So we will go right through that process. That will be critical for our country just to provide stability. In addition, of course, to COVID-19, which is primarily emergency appropriations. And then the final bill I'll note that's always important to our Hawaii is that every year we pass what we refer to as the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the authority for our military services to operate for the year. And since our federal government is so deeply involved in national defense in Hawaii, the NDAA, as we refer to it, is always a critical bill, not just for our country, but for our Hawaii, where we try to take care of our military infrastructure, where we try to take care of our working families in the service in Hawaii, and a host of other issues having to do. I'm going to defer again to Congressman Kahele on that because he's on that committee too. All right, go ahead. So what is my cycle? What does our cycle really look like? Well, a couple of things really to note. Number one, our fiscal year is October 1 to September 30th. And we are currently in fiscal year 21. The next fiscal year starts October 1 of this year. And that means that between now and October 2021, we have to finish our annual appropriations for the next fiscal year, FY22. I'll get into this a little bit more when I get to appropriations, but that's very much on everybody's minds, is syncing up with the appropriations cycle. Then, of course, we all are interested in our own legislative proposals, and with our colleagues' legislative proposals, the bills that we develop and introduce. We are already introducing those bills and trying to advance those bills. Congressman Kahele and I are working very, very closely with each other to make sure that we try to help each other where bills are of particular import to Hawaii, whether they be bills that I introduced the last time around or that he is introducing himself and developing, or whether they be carryover bills from Congresswoman Gabbard, who of course has now left the House, but nonetheless she had very, very good legislative proposals, and they should be advanced. So we're going through that bill process, which is important to Hawaii in terms of how to work with your congressional delegation, because we need your ideas on the areas where you want the federal government to be involved for Hawaii. Whatever your problem is, if there's a federal nexus, we'll try to fix it either through the appropriations process or through bills or through intervening with our federal administration on regulations. And then the final area that the congressional cycle goes through is really our efforts in our committees, which are the areas where we tend to focus much of our energy, just as with state and county governments. Same basic principle. Committees do the work, report to the floor, and if you're on those committees, you have far more influence over the subject matter of those committees. We also operate through caucuses, which are informal or formal organizations of fellow members, all dedicated to a particular purpose. So, for example, we have a Congressional Veterans Caucus, which focuses only on veterans issues. And many members are in that caucus, and we all try to work together to help veterans. We use these caucuses to help Hawaii. Let's say I have a particular veteran issue that is affecting Hawaii, of which there are several. I would tend to try to work with my caucus members from across the country to achieve our result and get mutual support for our goals. Okay, I think that's it for a big picture overview. I think we're going to go on to committees. Go ahead, Wisdom.
All right, am I back?
Yep.
All right, great. Okay, so, as a brand new freshman, committee assignments are absolutely critical. And, my team outlined what we thought would be the best committees to serve Hawaii right after the general election, and we worked really, really hard on that. And so, I'm pleased to announce that I've been assigned and nominated to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which is a key committee for Hawaii. Was my #1 committee choice. It was very competitive, and I was fortunate to be nominated to that committee. As you can see, the committee has a very broad jurisdiction over aviation, maritime, waterborne transportation, highways, bridges, mass transit. Where it's mass transit obviously is a big issue in Hawaii, especially on Oahu, and of course our nation's railroad infrastructure system. So, like Congressman Case said, key investments in clean water, in wastewater management, investments in our airports, and especially as it relates to rural communities, and infrastructure is really important. And so I was really fortunate to get put on that committee. One thing that's different that I learned from the state Senate, having had a chance to chair and be on various different committees, is you have as equally important subcommittees. And because transportation infrastructure is so broad across the country, they separate those various committees into subcommittees, and those different chairs chair specific subcommittees as well. And so I'm currently working on trying to get assigned to the aviation subcommittee, of course, with my interest and passion as a commercial airline pilot. And then I'm looking at least one other subcommittee to serve on as well. But the T&I committee is going to be a great committee for Hawaii. There's specific needs for the district in terms of infrastructure and transportation related things. Please contact my office, and we'll work together, of course, with Congressman Case, who's on appropriations, to try and see if we can get those in the federal budget. Next slide. As Congressman Case mentioned before, as we go to the next slide, the military is a key benchmark of the economic engine of Hawaii, and has been really holding the state up for the last year as we've dealt with the coronavirus pandemic. And so on the Armed Services Committee, again, you have various different subcommittees. And this was my second most important committee. Hawaii has not had a member not serve on armed services in a very, very long time. So, I follow a proud history of other members of Congress, Congressman Abercrombie, Gabbard, Takai, who served on the Armed Services Committee when they were there. So, of course, the Armed Services Committee puts together one of the few budgets that will guarantee with almost near certainty pass every year, and that's the National Defense Authorization Act. And so, when we're talking about the Homeland Defense radar, or the fuel tanks in Red Hill, long-term leasing at Pakuloa, unexploded ordnance cleanup on Kaho'olawe, or different parts of throughout the state, investing in the new barracks at Pakuloa and that infrastructure. The Armed Services Committee is key. The National Defense Authorization Act is key. And, making sure we have a deep water harbor and a maintenance facility at Pearl Harbor that employs several thousand federal civil service employees is really important to Hawaii. So being on armed services is another great win for Hawaii. And I'm super excited to be on two very sought after and highly competitive committees. And I think when looking at Senator Schatz's committees, the position they will now play in the Democratic majority, Senator Hirono's, Congressman Case's committees, and his key positions on appropriations, and the key subcommittees he's on, as well as other committees like natural resources that has purview over Native Hawaiian issues. Our 4-member delegation is well positioned to be effective for Hawaii. And then the slide is not on here, but just for the audience's sake, the third committee, typically members serve on 2 committees, unless you're on an exclusive committee. An exclusive committee being the Appropriations Committee that Congressman Case is on. There are a handful of exclusive committees, but if a member wishes to, they can serve on one additional committee through a waiver process. And so I've requested a waiver to serve on the Agriculture Committee. And I think that is would round out the trifecta of committees that I would like to serve on. Agriculture is such a big part of the 2nd Congressional District. We talk about feeding our people. farm to table, sustainability, diversifying our economy. We need a champion on ag. We need somebody that owns ag, engages the community, small businesses, small farmers, and can help shape the 2022 Farm Bill so that we can make sure that, you know, everything from tropical cut agriculture, industrial hemp, coffee, ornamentals, you know, cattle, livestock, all of those things are addressed in the Farm Bill. In addition to, in some cases, rural infrastructure, broadband. And so I really think that getting the chance to serve on agriculture would be another big benefit for Hawaii. So those are the three committees that I'm hoping to serve on. I've got two of them, working on one more. And if I can get the Ag Committee, then we're lock loaded and ready to go. So with that being said, those are the committees I'm on. And I'm gonna hand it back to Congressman Case to talk about his committees.
Okay, thanks so much, Kai. And I want to emphasize, it was very unusual for Congressman Kahele to get on both transportation and infrastructure and armed services. Those are highly coveted committees, and so that really was a testament. He did a lot of work before he got to Congress to facilitate that happening. And so there's the result of it. And what he said is exactly right. We have a very, very good spread of committees throughout the delegation now. When you're a small delegation in a big country, you got to pull above your weight. And I think with these committee assignments, we are going to be able to do that. Let me talk about appropriations. Appropriations Committee is responsible for all federal discretionary spending. I'll get into that. In Congress, we have a distinction between authorizing committees and the Appropriations Committee. The authorizing committees are the subject matter committees that basically create the programs and authorize the programs and amend the programs that the federal government engages in. But the authorizing committees can't spend the money to carry out those programs. Only the Appropriations Committee can spend the money, and the idea is pretty straightforward. You want and need a committee that all money flows through so that it can centralize it, can prioritize it, it can distribute it according to policies set by Congress. So I was really fortunate to get on that committee. It had been a number of decades. Actually, the last member of the Congressional delegation from Hawaii who had been on appropriations was then Representative Akaka in the late 70s and early 80s before he went to the Senate. So it'd been a long, long time. I'm going to just give you really fast some primers on appropriations and then get into the subject at hand, which is how can we avail ourselves of this federal funding. I already talked about the fiscal year, October 1st, and so I am well into the process, even though Congress just started. I've already been working for a couple of months now on the FY22 appropriations process. So the fiscal year that starts October 1st of this year. Appropriations have to start in Congress under our Constitution. The administration cannot appropriate. Congress appropriates. And so within Congress, appropriations originate in the House. And they originated in the House Appropriations Committee. So this is kind of where things start. Federal spending is split into mandatory and non-discretionary and discretionary. And I think you would all be familiar with this from your own state and county government budgets. Mandatory is, I don't want to say automatic because it can be changed, it can be amended, but it doesn't require an annual appropriation. A good example would be Social Security. We don't appropriate Social Security every year. It happens automatically. What we worry about is that program working overall to maintain the delivery of benefits as well as fiscal solvency. But the Appropriations Committee is not directly involved in that from year to year. Discretionary spending is everything else. So that is what we divvy up every single year. And again, it starts with the Appropriations Committee. So that's what this is the bottom line here is this is my opportunity and our opportunity in the Hawaii Congressional delegation to influence how much federal spending goes to where and when and how in Hawaii. Okay. Go ahead. This is a quick breakdown of FY20 federal spending. This caught the tail end of some of the COVID impact from last year, most of which was FY20. So this includes COVID-19 emergency relief. You can see that of all federal spending in FY 2020, the entirety of it, somewhere around, on the discretionary side, I should say, somewhere around 28% was COVID-19. So that'll give you some sense of the scale of the amount of money that we primed our country with in COVID-19. But if you also take a look at the rest of the slides, you'll see the mandatory there, which I already spoke to. And then down on the bottom right, for the most part, you will see discretionary spending. Defense discretionary, because national defense spending in one way, shape, or form accounts for somewhere in the range of half of our discretionary spending. Non-defense, and then interest on our national debt. So this is a major concern. Interest on our national debt is actually the fastest growing portion of our budget right now, and that's why fiscal responsibility matters, because over the long run, interest will start to crowd out our ability to spend money on anything other than repaying people for lending us the money that we needed to borrow because our budget was not balanced. Go ahead. Okay, this is breaking federal discretionary spending down a little bit more. This is not with COVID-19, so I've taken that out. So consider this a quote unquote normal year at about $1.4 trillion. Down at the bottom right, you can see defense at close to a half, and then other major areas. You can see labor, health, and human services, social service programs, social safety net about 15%. Transportation, housing and urban development, infrastructure 6%. You can peruse this at your pleasure, and I think we're actually going to send out this deck to everybody. Now, just because let's pick one of these. Just because agriculture only gets 2%, that doesn't mean that's not very much money. 2% of 1.4 trillion is a lot of money. So there's still a lot that can be done with a 2% agriculture budget for us in Hawaii for our needs at our scale. Okay, go ahead. You flipping it?
I am, sorry, it's just lagging a little bit.
This is a previous FY, but not so much different from FY 20 or 21. This tries to give you a sense of, for the state of Hawaii, where is that federal money going? The 20% of our state operating budget that comes from federal monies, where are we actually spending that? And you can see that Medicaid is far and away the largest amount, followed by the Department of Human Services, which is school nutrition, women and infant children assistance. These are major federal programs which are administered by the state with federal monies. Department of Education, a major component and very topical to all of you in state, especially state government right now, as DOE struggles with the effects of COVID-19. The federal government contributes close to $300 million a year to a Department of Education, and that's before COVID-19 emergency assistance. Transportation, another big one, Department of Health, and then you can see the rest. Go ahead. Similar slide, just using the city and county of Honolulu as an example. The numbers are smaller because, as you all know, in Hawaii, we tend to operate much more out of the state. So these figures would look much different from other states where a lot of the responsibility and funding is devolved to the counties. But you can again see that the county is similar to the state, with one exception, and that is the Department of Transportation, where the county does receive direct federal funding, and housing and urban development. The county gets CDBG, community development block grants, which are major areas of assistance to our communities. Department of Health and Human Services, the county administers health and human service related to include basic health provisions. I think that's all. The Office of National Drug Control Policy is actually a major program that is funded mostly out of the counties, and that funds a lot of our law enforcement down at the police and firefighter level. This slide would be similar to other counties in Hawaii, just smaller numbers. Okay, timing of appropriations. I'm going to whip through this. Here's the basic point of this slide. This is what I have to do and when, and thus what I need from you if and as you have ideas for me to consider in appropriations. President Biden has to submit a budget at the beginning of February in just a few days. He just started his administration. There's not going to be much in that budget. It's not going to be particularly relevant. February 15th is when I need your requests to my office for federal appropriations. And on my website, case.house.gov, there is a button that says appropriations requests. So that's your entree into my office for this purpose. This is for me to be able to develop my own submissions to the Appropriations Committee, because although I'm on the Appropriations Committee and have to make decisions on all of these requests, I also, of course, want to make my own requests. And I spend a great deal of time in the first quarter of every year making sure that I have requests that I can defend. And to be able to defend them, I need maximum information, maximum justification. So we're perfectly willing and available to work with you on developing those appropriations requests. But what would really help me is as much detail as you can give on how much money, why, what federal program. I understand not everybody knows all that stuff or has access to it, but just do as much as you possibly can, and we'll take it from there. Then we go through a period in which we get the requests in. May or June, we start to put our bills together. June and July, we take them through Congress, and ideally we report them out of Congress, and the president signs them in September because the fiscal year starts on October 1st. This is a deadline that we have consistently ignored for several Congresses now because we can't get our act together to get the bills out in what we call regular order for various reasons. And we saw the raw effects of that 2 years ago, where the bills were delayed and we had the longest government shutdown in our history. Because if the appropriations bills are not passed, then there's no money to fund our federal government, it being an annual exercise. So we try very hard to avoid that result, but the fact is that politics and division have hindered that process, and to the point that it's become quite a mess. Okay. Go ahead. Okay. Again, one of the major points of this seminar is to get you familiar with us and how we work and how to work with us and how to ask us questions and forward needs, but for my purposes and for Congressman Kahele's as well, because everybody does submit their own requests to the Appropriations Committee, and Congressman Kahele and I coordinate that very closely so that we're maximizing our collective effort. But for my purposes, these are some kind of helpful points. If you can help us with this, start really, really early. If you don't exactly know where you want to go, contact us and we will talk it through with you. Let's say that you have a particular issue with, community development in a rural part of our state. We know that the USDA actually operates rural development, which has little to do with agriculture and a lot to do with rural development. That's not always common knowledge. So sometimes we just know where a program is that might fit your need. But to the extent you can get us this information before you come to us or as you come to us, it'll really help. If you know what program you want the money from, how much is in that program this year, if you know? How much do you reasonably think you need for the need? A summary, obviously, and then on occasion we work not only with actual funding out of appropriations, but we use what you all are familiar with, which is committee reports and committee language. These are directions from Congress to the federal agencies to do something related to funding. They're not funding in and of themselves. But let's say that I have an issue that I'm not getting an answer out of the federal administration on. I can direct them to answer me in appropriations. And oftentimes that will solve an issue or it will facilitate a funding request in the next year. So this is not just a year-to-year function. Sometimes it's a long-term function where you're thinking 3, 4, 7 years down the road. Okay, if I do this year, then next year I can do this, then next year I can do that, the next year maybe I'll get where I want to get to. And then office forms on our websites, and be conscious that just because my deadline is February 15th doesn't mean that Congressman Kahele's or our 2 senators' deadline is going to be the same. We all set it for ourselves. Okay, that's and I forgot to mention in the same breath, and Kai mentioned it, that my other committee that I'm very, very happy to work on and to be reappointed to this time around on a waiver basis also, because when you're on appropriations, you're not supposed to serve on another committee, but I've got some capacity and natural resources is a critical area for Hawaii. So I served on that last time around and I'm going to continue there. That's going to give me influence over exactly what it sounds like, natural resources, whether it be our oceans or our national parks or our water, but also in that committee is jurisdiction over Native Hawaiians. So I can line up with Senator Schatz on that, since he, again, will likely be very involved in that committee. And of course, Congressman Kahele is going to provide the delegation with direction in terms of Native Hawaiian affairs. Go ahead. Back to you, Congressman.
Okay. How's my visual now? Do you have me?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to talk about the federal grant opportunities process. I'll try and whiz through it as well. But, this is an important part of what we do here in Congress, because we can help facilitate various different federal grants that can help your state agencies, your county agencies, nonprofits. One example is when in my previous life, running a nonprofit, I had applied for several years for the ANA grant, or the Administration of Native Americans grant. They had a grant to help Native Hawaiian programs or indigenous programs. We were never successful, but I did have a good inside look at how challenging it is to apply for a federal grant. It is definitely not easy. It takes time, and you want to get started early. And so, basically, a federal grant is administered through different federal agencies that fund opportunities for state and local governments and nonprofits to implement projects. The best place to look for federal grant opportunities is on the grants.gov website. So go to grants.gov. It's your one-stop shop library for information for different organizations when you're looking at trying to align specific needs in your community that you want to seek federal funding for. Through the grants.gov website, there are links to different federal agencies. As an example, Department of Agriculture, or the SBA, the Small Business Administration, Department of Labor. These are all opportunities through various agencies for federal grant monies. Federal grants are not guaranteed benefits. They're not entitlements to individuals. They're monies that go to these various different organizations to fund specific projects. 3 things that I think are really important is time. I mentioned it before. You want to allow for sufficient time to prepare a thoroughly documented proposal. You want to download that request for proposal link that will have all the information for the particular federal grant, and you want to start early. In many cases, you may need a DUNS number, or there's certain things you're going to need to qualify for that federal grant. So you really want to give yourself enough time and not be rushed. You want to follow the instructions that are provided by the granting agency and answer the questions in a clear and very brief, whenever possible manner. And try and approach your proposal to the style of the agency that's being proposed. So I'll go through a little bit more in detail on the next slide. First thing you want to do is define a project and get that project grant ready. So through your different community or your county or state department current needs during the strategic planning sessions, as you have these strategic planning sessions, identify what you want to address, right? The issue you're trying to solve in your community, and how would your community benefit from that grant funding. You want to be able to measure the impact in your community or in your specific department, and be prepared to explain how you're going to request that funding and the problem that it's going to solve. Once your department has identified a project, it's time to start planning. Like I said before, you more than likely are going to need a DUNS confirmation number or a SAM registration number. So these things take time. So start early. Of course, the most important aspect of any project is a budget. And so you want to make sure you have a very clearly defined and organized budget. It should be comprehensive. It should include all of the costs, in-kind donations, matching funds, equipment, accessories, additional training. You want to really nail the budget and be able to explain that. Then you want to research funding. So now once you have your project in mind, it's time to find out who can help you to fund it. So of course, go to grants.gov website or the different agencies, search for keywords. Once you have a funding source located, download the application requirements. And step number 3, prepare for the grant to open. Once the grant opens, it's going to be published via a request for proposal. Read that very carefully. Always good to have an extra set of eyes. Go through that as well. One of the reasons why, common reasons why grant applications are denied is because the applicants fail to follow just the basic directions and instructions in the RFP. Once you collect all of your documents, you reach out to local stakeholders, identify affinity groups, local stakeholders, whether it's local businesses, nonprofits, those that would help benefit from your project's proposal. Get letters of support, in-kind donations, monetary contributions. All of these things strengthen your application by demonstrating that the project will ultimately benefit the entire community. Then the application period is the time when you create, review, and submit your application. Make sure you know when that grant application submission deadline is, and utilize the different agencies or different departments that can help you make sure your application is ready to go once you've gathered all the information. The worst thing you would want to do is put all this time and effort into it and then miss a deadline, or go to submit and there's some technical problem in your application. So, you want to definitely try and have it done a few days prior, so there's no hiccups, so that you can apply. Of course, the narrative is one of the most important parts of your grant application. Keep it simple, and try and explain it to the best way possible, knowing who your audience is, the issue you're trying to solve. Finally, you have let's see, number 5, award and turn down. A grant maker typically will have 3 to 6 months to make their decision. Oftentimes through the honor grant, and I was never successful at getting the honor grant. I think we applied 3 years in a row and we weren't successful. And we would find out when ANA and the local Hawaii office, some of you guys know, like Keone Nunez, and there's a few others there that run that local office, they would release the successful applicants that were successful. But it can take 3 to 6 months for them to make their decision. And whether or not you get the grant or you get turned down for the grant, try and request feedback from the grant maker. The person that evaluated your application, scored your application, so that you can know how to strengthen your application in the future. Finally, if you are successful, it's time to manage your award. And once you do that, and you're able to successfully get your award and successfully get funded, you want to make sure that you're abiding by those measures of success that you outlined in your narrative. And of course, you should always be prepared for an audit from the agency that is managing your grant. And you can do this the best way possible by keeping all receipts, copies of receipts, make sure your reports are submitted on time, and basically being in compliance. So it's not just getting the grant, but making sure on your team you have someone who knows the compliance aspect of it, the accounting aspect of it. And there are some good nonprofits throughout Hawaii that can support with that as well. And then finally, number 7 is the closeout piece. Once you've tied up all the loose ends related to your application, get ready and get prepared for next year's grant application, and be prepared to apply again if you weren't successful for funding. I think in summary, key takeaways from federal grant applications and your particular agency or NGO or organization in pursuing a federal grant is grant writing is a skill. It's a learnable skill, but it is definitely a skill. Writing a successful grant is difficult. Being in Hilo, one of the best grant writers that I knew and a lot of people knew was George Yokoyama, the late George Yokoyama at HCLC in Hilo. And year after year after year, he would be successful because he knew how to write grants, and grant writing is a skill. So find somebody in your organization who can write. Competition can be daunting, but don't be discouraged. Take the time to learn from the setbacks and success of others. Keep your language simple. And at the end of the day, you're trying to convince a jury or someone who's reading your grant that your ideas are worthy, and the impact you're going to make in your community and the people that live in our community and your community throughout Hawaii, that this grant proposal is worthwhile. I give you an example. I had written a grant for the honor grant 3 years in a row for a project specific to Miloli'i, where my family comes from. But Ho'okena, a nearby Native Hawaiian community, applied for the same grant, and they were successful. Their grant was to build a halau and do some culture-based things for the community there and the kids there. And we were very happy that they got the honor grant. We benefited from them, and we shared in their success. So find like-minded organizations or like-minded communities in your universe that you can team up with or you can benefit from for federal grant opportunities. And I think that is the last slide that I have in terms of federal grants. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, great. I'm gonna pass it back to Congressman Case. He'll talk about COVID-19 funding.
Okay, I just want to emphasize the importance of grants. They are underutilized in Hawaii. Some parts of Hawaii use it very, very well. Some parts of Hawaii don't use it very well at all, if we even think about it. We're not, the purpose of this webinar is issue recognition. The purpose is for you in the discharge of your duties to think about us if you think there might be something that we need to know or that you need from us or that you think we might be able to help you with on the federal level. We can help you with all kinds of stuff. We can help you with information on what the federal government is doing. We can help you by, helping our mutual constituents with needs that are federal. I mentioned immigration and veterans as 2 examples. We can help you with trying to solve your own issues in your district through federal assistance, and we can help you with federal grant assistance for your state, counties, and community organizations. We can help you with supporting your grant applications as long as it's something that we think we can put ourselves behind, and it's a sound request. So just consider that as you are listening to what we're talking about. How can we contribute to you, your efforts to help the folks that we both represent? I'm going to go quickly through COVID-19. What's happening, what is going to happen, and what is happening right now, and what is going to happen. Again, we're going to be in the middle of COVID-19 for years now. And the federal government is the only place in the entire world that has the resources, the will, and the ability to help all of us through a deep, deep crisis. And the federal government needs to step up. It's our government, and that's when we need it. I talked about CARES earlier, and I talked about the bill that we passed in March of last year, the first emergency assistance package, the CARES Act, where we've seen somewhere around 10.6, 10.7 billion come to Hawaii in various areas. One of the best results in the country, by the way. So we did very, very well in the CARES funding. This is going to be familiar in large part to many, many of you. Paycheck Protection Program at $2.5 billion to our small businesses, one of the highest pro rata distributions to small businesses in the entire country. We supplemented federal unemployment insurance assistance. We had the COVID relief funds to the state government and the city and county of Honolulu. Long story why the other counties did not get direct funding, hopefully fixed in the future. The economic impact payments, which were the direct stimulus payments to individuals and families. And then the economic injury disaster loan program, which was also small business related. Again, there were about 75, 76, 77 programs we were tracking that made up to 10.6. That's all very good news. It got us through a lot of the tough stuff, not sufficiently because the crisis was deeper than CARES. And we knew from the very beginning, or at least many of us did, that we would need another package. It was a tragedy that it took us so long to do that. But nonetheless, CARES served its purpose, but CARES is pretty much POW at this point. And so in December, we passed really another version, second emergency assistance package, which, as you all know, was very, very hotly negotiated and contested and didn't get enacted until the very, very end of this Congress, again, tragically, but that's the reality that we're dealing with. That's about $900 billion. Many of the same buckets, but smaller amounts, obviously, because there's 900 billion as opposed to 2 trillion plus. Some of them are basically repeats of programs from CARES, whether it be the direct economic impact payments at half the amount that was distributed the first time around. Those should be arriving right now. They are arriving right now. Further federal supplemental unemployment benefits at half the amount. Again, these figures are negotiated in a difficult Congress and presidency. PPP again for our small businesses. And I would say on that subject that I don't think our small businesses know sufficiently that the PPP program is open again. And so it's not being utilized very much yet. As of a couple of days ago, only about $5 or $7 billion out of 275 or so had been utilized. That's much different from the first time around when that first round went in no time. So please help us get the word out on PPP availability to our small businesses who really critically need it, especially in travel and tourism. Critically, $32 billion for vaccine distribution, which is a major issue for us in Hawaii right now, getting the vaccine out and about Hawaii. And our State Department of Health has significant funding to do that. Emergency rental assistance, SNAP and child nutrition benefits. The one huge puka here is no further assistance directly to state and county governments right now. That was a tragic disagreement. I didn't agree with that at all, but many, many members of Congress believe that there should be no additional funding to state and county governments for various reasons. This bill had to be passed. It was a compromise that was omitted. I hope we can come back and give state and county governments further discretionary monies. And to Kelly King's question, Kelly, the $900 billion package in December did extend the deadline by which state and county governments need to expend their CARES Act funding, if they have any left, to the end of this year rather than last year. We are working on a third emergency assistance package right now. I think you all know that in one of his very first acts, President Biden announced, actually he did this before he was even inaugurated, he announced his initiative for roughly a $1.9 trillion third emergency assistance package. I don't have the details of that quite yet. I have an outline. It basically follows the prior two bills. I believe that in the House, the US House, our intention is to pass that pretty fast. We're talking about the next month to 6 weeks. And so from our perspective, one of the issues that we have to do is to figure out what was not covered in CARES 1 and the CARES 2 package, and make sure that those pukas are plugged for us in Hawaii. So we need your help on that one because that's going to be a really critical part of the additional emergency assistance. To Kelly's comment just now on the chat, it is correct that the PPP program second time around was much more limited in terms of small businesses that actually demonstrated a disproportionate need for those monies. The first time around, it was not so much limited by whether you did or didn't need it. You got it. We figured that everybody did need it. It's a little bit more limited now. But the point is that people that got a PPP the first time around can apply if they qualify for a second time around. Let's see, I'm going to stop there and turn it back to Congressman Kahele for our last issue.
Is this my slide?
No, Wisdom,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Constituent services. Yeah, so, we are, both Congressman Case and I have robust case workshops, and, we are here to try and facilitate, solving issues, whether it's in your local department, your county, state government, or even a constituent. We touch every part of the federal government, and we want to help in whatever way, shape, or form. Of course, those are typically our caseworkers are housed in our district offices. So Congressman Case is on the island of Oahu. Mine is over in Hilo, but we work side by side between our two offices and work together to try and solve those problems. Some of the biggest issues that constituents reach out, obviously healthcare as it relates to Medicaid or Medicare, veterans benefits, veterans issues, veterans healthcare is really a top issue. Immigration in some cases, there's a lot of issues that constituents call in for. Oftentimes constituents don't understand the jurisdictional authority. They're calling us because it's a particular road issue, or it's an issue that might be better solved at the state or county level. And we, through our field offices and our district offices, try and connect those constituents with the appropriate representative for the district or the appropriate council member, or how we can best solve that problem. But I have a standing policy in our office. We try as much as possible, I like to say, from cradle to grave, to solve a individual constituent's issue or problem, not necessarily hand them off to someone else, or hand them off to Congressman Case if the constituent is in the 1st congressional district, but tie them all together and try and work together to solve that particular problem. And so, we work together with that. We'd often say we may have CD1, CD2, but the issues that we deal with affect all of Hawaii, affect all of our country. And so we, try to work together as a team to solve those issues. Let's see, Congressman Case, you want to talk about anything to do with ethics restrictions along those lines? Have a little more experience with that?
Yeah. So, we function in Hawaii like the rest of the country. We have our formal congressional districts. I have formally the 1st congressional district that I already described, and Congressman Kahele has the 2nd congressional. You can't operate that way in a small state like Hawaii. And so for all intents and purposes, we cross over all the time, and we function as at-large members of Congress. So I don't say to whoever's in the 2nd congressional, I'm not going to help, in appropriations to improve Hilo Harbor, for example. And similarly, Congressman Kahele spoke about the needs at Red Hill, which is in my district. And so it's critical for us to both help each other and to basically represent the whole state. And we do that in appropriations and in trying to help federal efforts throughout Hawaii. The one area where there is a more of a bright line is on individual constituent services. So the casework that I talked about, where the rules of ethics of Congress require that unless we have a very good reason to help somebody that's not in our district, meaning that we have a longstanding relationship with them, very, very limited exceptions, we have to turn that case over to our colleague in that district. And the reason for this ethics rule is a good one, which is you don't want people poaching into somebody else's district. And you want people going to their member of Congress. And so we honor that. And so if a constituent from Maui contacts me with an individual need and they're not within the exception, I refer them to Congressman Kahele, and he does vice versa for people in my district. We work all the time across our offices to make sure that person is being covered. But when you refer somebody to our offices, which you're welcome to do on federal issues, please be conscious of that rule, so you refer it to the right office. Don't refer it to both of us. Chances are that one of us can't do it. So please, if you're on the other islands in Oahu, it's Kai, and if it's on Oahu, then it depends on where they live. So help us out that way. But bottom line is we definitely try to service everybody. I would say that also, Congressman, that this isn't just about helping people with their federal issues, because we all know, representing our constituents, that they don't often know what branch of government is responsible for what. They don't necessarily know that immigration is all on the federal side, or for that matter, that water bills are usually going to be on the county side, and they call whatever elected official they're familiar with and comfortable calling, and so that's fine with us. But what we do a lot is try to find them the right elected official. So that's why our partnership is important, so that if I do get that county water bill question, I can refer that person to his or her county elected official to solve the problem where it should be solved. And we ask the same thing on your side. So obviously, if you get questions that are federal, you are welcome to refer them over to us. We want to help in that department. Let's see.
Yeah, last slide, and then we can take questions.
Yep.
I think it's a partnership. We're a team, and Congressman Case brings a unique perspective as someone who, we're proud to say, both Hilo boys, and grew up in Hilo, and Congressman Case has neighbor island, deep neighbor island connections, and we share a couple real special places that have been part of our families for a long time. He has also been the second congressional member of Congress, and when he took over for filling the big shoes of the late Congresswoman Patsy Mink, really a trailblazer for Hawaii on the national stage. And now he's the first congressional district member. And so, he has a lot of knowledge in terms of issues that are very different throughout the Hawaiian Islands and throughout the state. And then I bring a unique perspective as someone who has practically grown up on the neighbor islands all of my entire life. And so I think we make a great team. I can't thank him enough and his team. Ever since the August 8th primary election, was a done deal, and we were moving towards a general. We really worked together on helping me prepare for, if I was successful after the November general election, knowing how compressed the time would be before I was sworn in as a member of Congress, because he had already done it twice in his career. And his mentorship and working together with me were pivotal. And he said earlier, I worked really hard on getting the T&I on the Armed Services Committee. Well, I did, because I got the advice and the strategic advice from Congressman Case to help land on those committees. So, that success is very much attributed to his partnership. So we are a team. Our teams work together. We have a standing weekly meeting that we have every week, where we talk about the issues for Hawaii. We talk about different appropriations and funding things. We talk about what's happening and different policy things we want to work on together. Obviously he's he's got a head start on me. So he had a big slate of bills that he was going to co-sponsor, and I got on board with practically all of them. And so that's a great thing about this partnership that we have. And this is now the second appropriations or basically overall briefing that we've done together, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. So it is a partnership. I want to thank my partner in Congress for helping me get this far, and we're looking forward to delivering for Hawaii, and that's our job, is to represent you. So
well, thanks so much, Congressman, and likewise back to you on your very kind words. I think you all know in state and county government and that life is so much easier if you have true partners. And if you're out there alone trying to do the job, it's tough, especially in a delegation of only 4. And so to have a partner in Congressman Kahele, a full partner, is just such a good feeling. And I think it'll be very good for Hawaii. And a partnership doesn't mean we're gonna vote the same way every time. We're not gonna vote the same way every time. So the first time you see me voting one way and Kai voting the other way, and in the Star Advertiser, don't flip out. We both have our constituencies, we both have our ideas, and we're gonna diverge from time to time. We already have, but the bottom line is that what's been true for the delegation from Hawaii over the decades has been that it always was pretty darn unified when it came to trying to help Hawaii, when it came to trying to help the state, the counties, our communities, and individual folks. And so that partnership is going to be wonderful. I'm really grateful for that. Before I forget, we would like to hear your feedback on this webinar. So if you could kindly shoot us a quick email saying, how was it? I guess you can chat it right now and we'll pick it up on the chat, but if not, do it on the email as well. We would love to try to improve on this. This is kind of a first shot by us, but as Congressman Kahele said, we want to keep doing this with you because you are our partners, and if we're all hanging together, then we're all going to do a better job for our constituents. I'm going to whip a few of the questions, Kai, just because I think I can probably.
Yep, go for it.
They probably are kind of more in my kuleana. So to Gail Kaito, Department of Community Service, on the rent moratorium. I believe that the president yesterday actually did sign an executive order that extended the existing moratorium until March. So I'm not sure you're going to get official notice so much from the federal government. Maybe you will. But the bottom line is that it was what was happening before the inauguration is extended until the end of March. And if you will contact us directly, we'll send you that executive order because that's what we have right now. If there's any further questions, then you can contact us and we'll go chase that. Let's see, to Kathy Mitchell at the Board of Water Supply, Honolulu Board of Water Supply. Thank you for that suggestion. I think we've seen that program before. And we also thought it was a little bit of a hidden gem there that nobody was really focusing on. So I'm going to ask my staff here if Anthony or other staff's on the line, if you could please contact Kathy, get the details. You can see it on the question, and let's find out whether that program actually is being utilized, because it might be just falling off the radar for a lot of people, and we don't like federal programs falling off the radar for people. Let's see, to Sarah Nakashima, I think it was CARES general restriction. Was it use it or lose it? Yes, the CARES Act money, I think you're referring to state and county government, the so-called coronavirus relief fund, the discretionary 1.25 billion that came into the state and the city and county of Honolulu had a deadline of December 31st that was use it or lose it. And I was concerned that the state and county governments were not on the right path to using it. The consequence being that it was going to be waived back. As it turned out, the bill that we passed in December extended that deadline for a year. That was to Kelly King's question earlier. However, the tragedy of it was that it was late in the year, so that state and county governments had to make a call about what to do with it. So they may well have spent that money, even though they could have continued it on. As to the test kits and the vaccination, again, there was money in CARES. I believe that they did well, I don't believe, I know that they did actually apply that money in part to test kits, but the 900 billion that we just supplemented in December had that additional 32 billion in it, which was for the purpose of in part assisting with contact testing and tracing and vaccinations. And so that money is with the State Department of Health, and they can use it for additional test kits if they want. Now, if you hear anything different from that, or I have it wrong, then let me know right away so that we can kind of chase that one down. Let's see. Alex Kozlov from the City and County Department of Design and Construction. What is your prediction on whether there is true bipartisan support to stop managing by CR and provide agencies predictable funding? To be determined. Like I said, we haven't done a good job of that earlier. We haven't met our appropriations deadlines by October 1st. And what that results in is what we call a continuing resolution, which is a fancy way of saying, well, we're busy getting our act together, just keep spending what you did spend. That does tremendous damage, as you pointed out, to budgets across the country that are reliant upon our annual appropriations, because they have no predictability about what's going to happen that year. The military is particularly impacted by this, but not just the military. So all I can do is hope that in a new beginning, that we will get our act together and actually get these appropriations bills back to a cycle in which they are completed and signed by October 1st of each year. But in terms of the predictability of funding, because of the way we set it up, we do appropriate every year, although there are many, many programs out there that are not changed materially from year to year. So in that sense, there's some predictability, but the CRs is what really messes people up. Let's see, that's all I got. Congressman, anything further?
No, I'm just looking at the chat. I'm super thrilled that we have right now, including us, 113 people on this webinar, and I think it's a great testament to everyone, whether you're a legislator. Congratulations, by the way, on the legislature just starting up on January 20th. Like Congressman Kai said, him and I both went to the inauguration to witness President Biden take office. Of course, congratulations to our members on our various county councils. This is a new year. We have a new president. You're already seeing what I think is great executive orders. One of the ones that hits close to home for me is what the president did yesterday, where he extended the National Guard Title 32 502F funding to September 30th, 2021. And he also reversed the Trump administration's decision to cost share the FEMA funding that they implemented in the fall of 2020 to 75-25. So that directs 100% FEMA funding to our state of Hawaii to fund their National Guard units. It's the only way we're going to get through COVID-19 deep into the summer. And so, it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for us on a national level. We're excited for all of you at the state and county level, and we're here to work with you. We are an extension of you in Washington, D.C. So if there's anything that we can do to help, as we start to see legislative bills start to be introduced in the legislature, or how the state government is dealing with funding, please let us know. Let's see, there's a question. Do you have a sense of potential additional funding for renewable energy infrastructure? The only thing I would say with that is Democrats ran on a very robust and broad renewable energy platform. The fact we have unified government, although it is razor thin unified government, like Congressman Case said yesterday, 50-50 in the Senate. And right now, I think we're looking at like 220 in the House, very, very slim margins. So you're not going to see super big, bold ideas because the margins are so thin. But I think you will see the Democratic majority try to get things done in terms of renewable energy infrastructure. You can already see the president re-entering us into the Paris Climate Agreement, which is big for Hawaii, and the climate goals that we have in Hawaii and throughout the Pacific.
I will answer one or two here, and then I've got to get off.
Okay. Looks like a helicopter question, Congressman, from Congressman Molina.
Congressman, I am chasing helicopters as fast as I can. I reintroduced my Safe and Quiet Skies Act yesterday. It would allow state and county governments to try to regulate for the safety and community disruption consequences. I'd love to talk to you more about that. We would really like our county governments and state government to basically support and endorse that initiative, because it will help me when I'm in Congress to demonstrate that we are pretty united in Hawaii on wanting to tackle this particular scourge, I will call it. And then let's see, to Heather Kimball on increase in infrastructure spending and stimulus. Yes, we do intend to pass a big infrastructure bill, and that is partly about stimulus. And then to, let's see, Shannon, I think it was, on Maui, don't include Kennedy Center non-COVID in COVID relief. It wasn't in that. COVID relief was COVID relief. The normal appropriations process contained that funding for Kennedy Center, as it has for decades now. And the president unfortunately chose to confuse the two to leverage his goal of achieving things in that bill. So he lumped them together when they were separate. So that was a miscommunication, purposeful on the president's part. And at that point, Congressman, I'm going to have to get off and make another call to my colleagues. I think I covered everybody. Nola, right now, go on my website to Appropriations and check that information out. And I think Congressman Kahele has somewhat the same time frame.
Yeah, send it now. And then finally, Gary, yeah, I can see your question now in regards to aviation and the major passenger airlines coming over Haiku. I'm very familiar with those flight paths. But hey, you know what? Congressman Case needs to go. I know you guys are all busy as well. And so, you know, Hawaiian style, we want to wish you guys all a Hopena Pule Maikai. Have a great weekend. Have a great week. We're looking forward to working with you. And mahalo nui loa. Thank you, Congressman, for hosting this.
Okay, thank you, Congressman. Have a safe trip home. Aloha.
Aloha.